Goodbye Volvagia by Exorial Orchid. Did you know there's a limit to how many times a Pokemon can faint? I didn't. For some it could be hundreds, or thousands of times. For Volvagia, it was 42. Volvagia was my Dragonair. I was 19 at the time, a freshman in college, and still in love with Pokemon. Being in the honors college of my universities, though, a lot of people liked Pokemon, so I wasn't seen as weird for spending time playing it. A lot of people in my residence hall were excited for the remakes of Ruby and Sapphire, and we were getting antsy for their arrival. Finally, around the beginning of October, I couldn't stand it anymore, and in the spirits of remakes, I decided to replay Soul Silver. By the time I reached Goldenrod City, I had a Cyndaquil, a Wooper, who I would later replace with the Red Gyarados from the Lake of Rage, a Flaffy, and a Ghastly. A Larvitar would join our party once we reached the Safari Zone. I had named my own character Anna, after myself, and my rival I named Diomedes, because I was a smartass and I wanted to give him a name which meant evil of some kind. Upon arrival, I healed my Pokemon at the Pokemon Center and headed straight for the game corner. I knew what I wanted to do. I was going to win a Porygon. The game corner was different than I remembered it. There were no slots, only a man seated at a big table. Porygon was not one of the choices of prize Pokemon. I was so confused until I remembered the game corner I was thinking of was featured in red, blue, green, and yellow, and their remakes. I didn't mind though. The name Volvagia shot into my head as I looked at the shaky little blue dragon, Dratini. It reminded me so much of the Fire Temple boss from the Ocarina of Time, although its only similarity was being a dragon. I was determined. It cost 2,100 coins, and unfortunately there was no way for me to just buy the coins. I had no choice. Play the game of chance and win it. It took hours, and I nearly gave up on several occasions, but eventually, I had just over 2,100 coins and I made my way over to the left-hand brown-hatted man and pressed A. The prize menu popped up and I selected Dratini. It asked if I wanted to give it a nickname. Slowly I entered the name Volvagia, switched her to the front of my party, and marveled at her beauty as she followed behind me. She was level 15 and the rest of my Pokemon were level 20 through 25. I didn't have the experience share, so I trained her up in the old-fashioned way. She stayed at the head of my team and we went to train. I was never one for level grinding. It was slow and boring work and took forever when you were trying to strengthen something like a Dratini, which had a slow leveling rate according to Bulbapedia. So I didn't grind. I took Volvagia and I tried to train her. My team trudged on, and Volvagia was not growing very quickly. She fainted in almost every battle, whether it be against Whitney's Miltank or Price's Piloswine. We eventually beat the 7th gym and she finally evolved into a Dragonair. It was incredible that it had taken so long, but she was finally level 30, the rest of my team being nearly level 40 and some higher. That's when we got the call. It was Professor Birch telling us the radio tower in Goldenrod was taken over, and I'd better do something about it because apparently the police would be too obvious. I picked up a Pidgeotto I caught outside Ecruteak and flew to Goldenrod. We entered the Pokemon Tower, and with Volvagia at the front of my team, we took them on. That was how we managed to run into our biggest obstacle yet, Pursuit. If you don't know, Pursuit is a Dark-type move with a base power of 40 that has the highest priority rate in the game. It still hits your weak Pokemon if you're trying to switch it out, and it raises the base power to 80. Nearly every Team Rocket grunt has a Rattata or Raticate that could use Pursuit. And they did every time I attempted to switch Volvagia to Pupitar, over and over again, and received the message, Volvagia has fainted. Cursing under my breath, I returned to the Pokemon Center after each battle to heal up. As they were headed to the underground passage, I stopped by once more healing up and reviving a fainted Volvagia. Nurse Troy took my Pokemon, healed them, and the screen flashed black. I always got paranoid when that happened. I knew it was normal when you were picking up a Pokemon that had fainted but was at the head of your party, yet I still had a mini heart attack, worrying for a split second my game was crashing. It never did, and it is beside the point. Usually, one receives the message, Pokemon's name is feeling better, you decide to take it with you. But this time it didn't. Instead, I got the message, Volvagia doesn't look so good. Are you sure you want to take it with you? I was rushing through the text as most do, and didn't even think twice before pressing A when a yes or no option popped up. The text box said you decide to take Volvagia with you. I walked a space down, and in a puff of smoke, out popped Volvagia. She looked different though. Her sprite was colored differently. I stared, confused, and opened the Pokemon summary screen. There, she had only half HP and half PP for each of her moves. Her picture was translucent white with red eyes that looked evil somehow, although her position had not changed at all. I didn't mind the color change, it looked pretty cool actually. I did however mind that she was not fully healed. I talked to Nurse Joy again. "Welcome to the Pokemon Center," she beamed as usual. "Would you like to heal your Pokemon?" I selected yes and waited as she took the Pokemon and it went through the healing animation. When she turned back to me, the text box only contained an ellipsis. I pressed A again, and the nurse said, "I'm sorry for your loss. I've done all I could. Are you sure you want to take Volvagia with you?" Confused, I once again selected yes. Volvagia was still white with red eyes, still at half HP and PP. I sighed, figuring some kind of glitch had found its way into my game, and I left the Pokemon Center, finding the underground passage and entering it to further the story. My rival, Diomedes, showed up and challenged me to a battle. He sent out his first Pokemon and I sent out Volvagia. She was white from the back too, and her eyes shone through her head, so I could see the faint luminescent red glow through the skin. It looked so cool. The battle began and I tried to use the move Thunder Wave. The message popped up, "Volvagia won't obey." She took hit from Golbat's bite, but her HP did not decrease. Golbat took the damage, as though Volvagia was working as a voodoo doll. Diomedes' sprite showed up on screen as if it was his last Pokemon. He said, "Stop cheating, that thing is cursed." Again, I tried to use Thunder Wave. Instead, Volvagia used Dragon Rage. Strangely enough, Golbat took no damage, nor did Volvagia. Confused and frightened, I decided to switch to Ampharos, only to discover that the stray Dragon Rage had landed, it had fainted, and the two Pokemon on either side of him, Gyarados and Typhlosion, were nearly drained of HP as well, as though they had been caught in the shrapnel of the blast. I thought it must have been impossible. Dragon Rage was only supposed to do 40 damage. Had I forgotten to heal? No, I knew I had not forgotten. I attempted to switch to Haunter. Volvagia won't be switched out. Concerned, I went back to the battle at hand. Again, I attempted Thunder Wave, although I didn't expect it to work. To my surprise, it did. To my even bigger surprise, it took off a little chunk of Golbat's HP. The text box stated, "Golbat has been badly paralyzed." That wasn't even possible. You were either paralyzed or you weren't. There was no badly paralyzed in Pokemon. Every turn after, Golbat is paralyzed, it cannot move, and Volvagia would use its Dragon Rage, striking down another one of its allies. After 3 turns, Volvagia was the only one left in my party. Golbat finally got a move in, Bite. I watched in horror as Golbat's sprite turned white, the picture glitched out, and it fainted. Instead of letting out his next Pokemon, Diomedes appeared on screen. "I forfeit," he shouted, and the battle abruptly ended. On the overhead screen, Diomedes fiercely blocked my way to the next room. "Look what you did to my Golbat!" he cried. Golbat's pale white sprite appeared in front of me. "I'm not letting you pass until you get rid of that thing." I tried to walk around him, but the game would not let me. I left the underground tunnel and tried to leave Goldenrod, thinking I could continue the story. The door to the next route was locked, and the streets were deserted. I tried to fly away, but it said, "Volvagia refused to return to its Pokeball." Anna decided to walk. Every door was locked except for the Pokemon Center. I went in and straight to the PC. I tried to release Volvagia, only for the screen to flash black, and the message saying, "Volvagia does not want to be set free." Stumped, I walked around the town some more. Every door was closed, no people were on the streets. I was alone. I tried talking to Volvagia's sprite. Volvagia is staring menacingly at you. It looks upset. I tried to run, but my sprite would only walk, as though Volvagia's undead body would not allow me to speed up. I tried to use the bike. Instead of Professor Oak, though, it was Volvagia who was stopping me from riding. Volvagia refused to return to its Pokeball, and it decided to walk. Once again, I entered the Pokemon Center. Nurse Joy was behind the counter, waiting as always to cheerfully heal my Pokemon. I approached the counter and pressed A. "Welcome to the Pokemon Center," she said. It seemed cold, although there was no change in the music, nor text. "Would you like to heal your Pokemon?" I selected yes. When she turned back to me, she said, "I'm sorry for your loss. I've done all I could do. Are you sure you want to take Volvagia with you?" This time I selected no. I held my breath. It's for the best, Nurse Joy said. We'll give it a proper burial. The text box stated, Volvagia was forced into its Pokeball. Nurse Joy put Volvagia's Pokeball on the healing machine. A strange version of the healing music played, in a minor key, and she turned back to me. She's in a better place. Anna received Volvagia's urn. Put it in the key items pocket. The overworld went back to normal. I checked my party and Volvagia was absent. The rest of my Pokemon were fine, and I was able to progress through the story like usual. I replaced Volvagia with a Clefable that I had named Kokiri. I thought briefly about getting another Dratini and letting him hold the experience share until it was a high enough level, but it didn't feel right, and I really had no desire to go through all the Game Corner crap again. I made it through the final gym in the Pokemon League. I entered the Hall of Fame as usual and the credits rolled. As I opened my save again to begin my journey into Kanto, I found myself back in my bedroom. Not odd, but before I could move, Anna's sprite walked to an empty space on the desk. Put it here? The text box asked. Confused, I selected yes. It looked like a great orb of some sort with a small opening on the top. I tried to interact with it. Volvagia, the text box stated. Her urn. My heart fluttered a little, remembering the frightened occurrence with my Dragonair. Her sprite beside mine, once again blue, eyes still seething red. I could see the floor through her ghost. There was a pause. I couldn't move. Volvagia floated up and down slightly. I could feel the eyes of the sprite locked. Volvagia's intense, hate-filled, and ready to pounce. Anna's terrified and unsure. I felt myself imagining what Anna must have been seeing, looking up at her deceased dragon, its big, empty red eyes, full of hatred. I could nearly see the bright sanguine eyes, within them a distorted glimmer of Diomedes' mutilated Golbat. Tentatively, I tapped the A button. Once nothing, twice nothing. A third time, a staccato Dragonair cry sounded once, and then Volvagia faded away into nothingness. I sighed, murmured, "Goodbye, Volvagia," stepped downstairs and continued my journey. It went well, but it was not quite normal. For every time I fought someone with any member of the Dratini evolutionary line, it would only use two moves, Dragon Rage and Thunder Wave, the whole time its eyes shining red with hate. That was Goodbye Volvagia. Final thoughts? Kind of cliché, but also not that bad. First with the negative things, I think one major thing that could have been improved in this story would be removing the line at the start about how Pokemon can only faint so many times. It really does kind of spoil what will happen for the rest of the story. I understand that the idea was for it to build suspense, but it feels more like a spoiler than anything. There are also a few big cliches that have been used a lot. Pokemon sprites changing to white and red, player decides that an obviously completely changed line of dialogue as a glitch and continues on with the story without thinking twice, the Pokemon won't obey after a tragic event, trying to work the title into the story itself, stuff like that. I list these things, but I don't think the story was all that bad. I think it showed a lot of restraint that I appreciate. A lot of stories go completely overboard and will just start taking every little thing they see in other stories and shove them into theirs. The story seemed a lot more focused. There's a specific story it wanted to tell, and it kept that in mind the entire story. There's very little wasting of time, and just enough time was spent on rising and lowering action. I actually quite like this author, I'm just not really that into this specific story. Also, as a side note, I know the Pokemon was named Volvagia as a Chugga Conroy reference, but it really gets the reader's hopes up that it'll be a fresh new Zelda creepypasta when they see the title, only to find that in the first sentence it's another Pokemon creepypasta. And my god, we have a lot of Pokemon creepypasta on this show as is. I didn't take this into account when doing these final thoughts, as I thought it would be pretty unfair to judge the story based on that. I just thought it was worth bringing up. Before I get into the usual outro, I want to talk directly to you for a moment. Thank you very much for supporting my creepypasta readings. It means a lot to me that despite the very large turnaround rate of people subscribing just to unsubscribe less than a month later, a lot of you stay and watch this series every single week. As much as it is cool for me that I get to read these fan-made creepypasta every week, this creepypasta series is just a small weekly sideshow on my channel. The bulk of what I do is centered around gameplay and streams, from my Let's Plays to my weekly charity streams. In fact, the bulk of what I do is comedic. If there's one thing that I don't like about these readings, it's that people who only watch these only get to see me be serious. There isn't really any room for comedy when doing an analysis and critique of stories. If you've enjoyed this series and haven't checked out anything else I do, then all I ask is that you at least give one other video series of mine a shot. Watch one full episode. I know a lot of you love Pokémon, so the description will have a link to my favorite episode of my blind Pokémon Platinum playthrough that I'm doing, and if you want to see something else, I'll also have a link to one of my favorite episodes of Flash Trash. Both will be in the description, as well as on screen. If you watch it and don't like it though, that's cool. All I ask is that you give it a chance, and if it turns out it's not your thing, then at least you gave it a try. Thank you for your continued support. This channel is my full-time job, and when you get as little views as I do, every bit of support helps. That's it for this creepypasta. Tune in again next Saturday when we tackle yet another story made and sent in by the fans with The Desert. If you want to write your own story, help peer edit a story, or even just read the stories early, check out the description where you'll find a link to the creepypasta section of my forum. You'll also find a link to the playlist of every creepypasta reading I've done. If you're interested in keeping up with me on my blog posts, join the Facebook fan page linked below, and if you want to support me in what I do, check out my Patreon page in the description. Remember that if you want your story to be read on the show, you must stay active on the post on the forum, as well as read the forum rules. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, sweet dreams.